On my side, it's time for us to take note of some of the affairs that could be affecting you indirectly or directly. And that is Uganda's rule of law when power meets the law. I am Priscilla Regina Nalwoga, Madam Moderator. Now, as we look into a tech note this morning, the rule of law does sound simple. The law should be applying to everyone, right? Well, that's what comes to everyone's mind when we hear the word rule of law. But in a constitutional democracy, it actually goes much deeper than meets the ear and eye. It means that the government is bound by the constitution. It also means that security agencies operate within the law. It further means that courts are independent. It also means that citizens are entitled to due process, fair hearing, and protection of arbitrary detention. Uganda's constitution is unequivocal. The Constitution is the supreme law of our land and binds all authorities as well as all persons. Now, on that note, it also protects personal liberties and guarantees a fair hearing before an independent and impartial court. Now, today, Uganda is having an increasingly difficult conversation on whether these constitutional promises are being honored in actual practice. There have been allegations of arbitrary arrests, disappearances of people, home raids, restrictions on civic engagement, attacks on lawyers, and disputes over access of legal representation. Now, just to extract some cases that could be familiar to you as we unpack this conversation, the case of Dr. Sarah Birete, who was arrested and charged after her detention. This was before the elections in December 2025. Amnesty International describing that detention as arbitrary. Then this year alone, in June, security operatives raiding the home of veteran politician and former Ethics and Integrity Minister Miriam Matembe, and the Uganda Law Society coming out subsequently petitioning the IGP as well as the UPDF. These are legal authorities that were part and parcel of her detention and demanding that she be brought before court. Then came the case of Elias Lukwago himself, a lawyer, human rights defender, and of course one on the team of Dr. Kizza Besigye, whose arrest and detention also attracted condemnation from local and international bar associations and human rights organizations. And then, of course, there's the continued controversy surrounding the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye's access to his preferred legal representation. So, the question we are posing to ourselves this morning is not simply whether Uganda has laws, but the question we are posing, are these laws powerful enough to restrain power? Well, joining me is the Vice President of the Uganda Law Society, and that is Anthony Asiimwe, to help us break down this question. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Priscilla, and thank you for having me here today.
Okay, so let's start with really a simple opener. How would you rate the state of the rule of law in Uganda today? And of course, this is in consideration of the isolated cases that we've just highlighted and the misconduct. Is it a systemic situation that we're looking at today?
I want to believe, Priscilla, even if you ask that question to anyone on the street, considering the happenings and just a few examples you've highlighted, we are so worried. The state of the rule of law in the country is at its lowest, because we are witnessing a situation where there is, deliberate disrespect and disregard for the rule of law, where certain things are happening. And I should sum it up by saying it looks like we are now normalizing impunity, because the very people who are supposed to protect Ugandans, the very people who are supposed to protect this rule of law, the established principles, are the same people that are breaking them in broad daylight, probably to send a message that, hey, the law is useless here. We can do whatever we want and we get out with it. So the rule of law is, every other day that passes by, it's getting worse. And we're entering into a situation where there's no more certainty. You cannot be sure. At least when we talk about the rule of law, there should be certainty, because there are well laid down principles. It doesn't matter what offense someone could have committed or is alleged to have committed. There are certain procedures that should be followed. But right now, everyone is living on tenterhooks. You do not know whether what you're doing is, breaking the law, whether you're going to be not even. But
you know it's breaking the law or not breaking the law, because the law is right there. So it's not really that's not the gray line per se.
Priscilla, when you look at the examples you've given, and probably before even going deeper into those examples, even people are doing what they are constitutionally allowed to do. For example, you wake up in the morning, you're a journalist, you go out to report, to do your job that you're allowed to do. You're allowed to practice your profession. and the next day you're being abducted and, harassed, and you wonder whether what you're doing is actually breaking the law when it is not. So that's where the challenge is. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of, intimidation out there. It doesn't matter who you are, and everyone, incidentally, everyone is falling prey to this kind of situation in the country.
Okay, if everyone is falling prey to this situation in the country, then how do we remedy it?
Well, we've tried to take several steps. The law is an interesting thing. It's a double-edged sword. And we've come out openly to warn these people, the people in authority, the people who are actually at the forefront, who are demonstrating that they're above the law, that none is above the law. Now, the unfortunate thing is the local remedies we have, the institutions supposed to be implementing those remedies are equally, I don't want to use the word under capture, they're equally sleeping. They've become complacent.
What are some of these institutions we're talking about?
Take, for example, our judiciary. Our judiciary is something everyone is going to wonder whether they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, their constitutional duty. You've talked about these arrests. I don't want to use the word arrest. Most of them are enforced disappearances, they're abductions, they're done illegally. I mean, someone is picked from their home, they've gone missing. You've seen us every day and again make habeas corpus applications, and then the government comes out and denies having these people. You saw it in the NUP deputy presidents, both of them. We had the Kenyans here who are also abducted, and the judge even gave a ruling saying you cannot, the government says they do not have these people, and it's true they do not have them. The next day, we see the president coming out saying, I had them in my coolers. You've seen other examples where we filed these applications, some Mugumia, and the judiciary seems to be, not so bothered. Now, interestingly, after some time, these people are taken to police. They are dumped at police, and police, which is an institution, a government institution, accepts to receive these people, take them through the process. We see the office of the DPP put up charges against these people, and then they are brought to court eventually. The judicial officers also accept and hear these cases. They clean the wrong which has already been done. And what is also interesting is we have some constitutional safeguards. When a person is brought to court in such a manner, the first thing the judicial officer is supposed to do is to inquire into where this person is coming from. Where have they been? Have their rights been respected? Someone has been missing for months, but you're going to take plea and you remand the person to prison. It has now become, we used to call it a police to prison pipeline, but now it is different. It has become, abduction, police prison pipeline, because the institutions that are supposed to protect Ugandans have allowed to be used in that manner. That is why in some of the examples you're giving, you'll be shocked that right now, even if court grants someone bail, there's a celebration. Yet this is a constitutional right. It's almost like it's impossible to get that from courts of justice. These are the institutions that should be protecting the citizens, the individuals, against some of these, the executive overreach and the situations we are seeing. So that is why it becomes a bit difficult. And we've been calling upon all these institutions to step up and do their work, because, they are maintained by taxpayers' money and they have constitutional obligations and constitutional duties. But once the public now begins losing trust in these institutions, confidence in the judiciary, confidence in the police, the Uganda police and DPP and all these institutions, then we'll enter into a situation where we are descending into anarchy. People begin taking the law into their hands simply because they are seeing an example of what the people in authority are doing. Because Priscilla, right now, we're used to a situation of, we've talked about abductions. So now you cannot know who has abducted a person. Priscilla, today you're moving, you're abducted, and they will assume it is security forces. Now, other wrongdoers are going to come in.
Because even the security forces who have been doing it have been using, people who are not in uniforms.
Plain clothes.
Yeah.
Ordinary number plates of vehicles. So even other people, ordinary people, begin doing that, and we shall assume that, those are security agencies. It's a drone. Yes, it's a drone. And people will be murdered. And we've seen some of the things happen, and it is really dangerous that as a country we're allowing to go into this kind of situation. At the end of the day, it is very hard to come back from it. That is why we keep pushing and saying there must be respect for rule of law, there must be respect for due process.
Counsel, in respect of rule of law and due process, as you've duly mentioned, then it begs the question, who is to restrain the institutions that you've made mention of in order to then abide by the rule of law? How or who should be holding them accountable?
You know, we have a social contract between the government and the citizens and the Ugandans, the leaders we have. If we've gone through the process of election voting, whichever way it has happened, and we have a person in charge, we have the government in charge, it is the duty of the government to protect its citizens. They owe us that. They owe the citizens that. That is why citizens pay tax. They pay taxes, because this is, you know, for purposes of having public administration and proper governance. Now, if we have a governance problem, a governance situation, and the leaders we put into those offices, the people in charge of this of government are not bothered, at the end of the day, what are they for? Because as citizens, we demand for that kind of accountability. They need to be accountable to the citizens they are leading, because that's the reason they are there. So they are literally in breach of the social contract they have. Now, these other institutions we see, the government institutions, that the leaders of these institutions who are put in place to ensure that, you know, there's accountability, they exercise those roles and duties that are enshrined in the Constitution. We are living in a constitutional democracy where at least everything is well laid down. By the way, we have the best constitution when you look around, in writing. But the fact that the people who are, you know, given these roles, people are put in places to ensure that they perform these duties, are failing to do that for whatever reason. There's no excuse for that. If they cannot do their work, why don't they just resign and leave those offices? Or if they failed, why not come out? Because there's a situation where we are living in a more or less of a state of emergency. And of course it's not announced, but you realize everywhere you go, everything is upside down. And then Ugandans are normalizing it. We are saying it's no more. The day ends. This one has been abducted. We make a little noise, and that's the end. The next day something happens, and we move on, even when things are getting worse by the day. So we need to continue calling on these people, the people in charge, because I believe what we have now is not just, you know, disrespect for the rule of law, but we also have a governance problem. And I must say, I think we are in a constitutional crisis, because if you cannot respect even the simplest, even the most basic of the provisions in the Constitution, that is a crisis. And it should worry every Ugandan, not just us who are here able to speak about it, but every Ugandan, including those ones who are seated in those offices where they think they are comfortable, because at the end of the day, it will also come to them, and they'll have nowhere to run to. Because if you do not respect the rule of law, at some point you will come and you reach out for the law, and it is not there to help you. You're stuck.
All right. Let's talk about the case of the lawyer. You are people that we look up to in society to protect us or to help us with these due processes and participation in law. The case of Elias Lukwago particularly is significant because not only is he a Ugandan, not only is he a political figure, but more so a lawyer. Now, when a lawyer has been put in such a position as him, having represented opposition figures and, you know, become a subject of arrest and prosecution, what message is this sending to the legal profession?
Now, this has also been a worrying trend, and I remember we did predict this before it even happened. Lawyers are really the last line of defense for every Ugandan. Everyone has a right to legal representation, representation of their choice. And most Ugandans look up to lawyers as defenders of their rights. Someone has a problem, they'll run to a lawyer, be defended. But now, while we're seeing a deliberate attack on the legal profession, on the lawyers, the message it is meant to send out there is, you know, there's even no one to defend you. Regardless of what happens, you're on your own. And you notice that even before Elias Lukwago, we saw the Kale Barakas and team who were attempting to represent Anita Among being threatened, you know, and people start fearing to do their work. Number one, it is a total breach of even the international conventions we've ratified as a country. Lawyers are supposed to be free to perform their roles, not only lawyers, and the independence of the legal profession must be respected by every nation. We have the UN Basic Principles on independence of lawyers. We have the IBA standards on the independence of lawyers. But then also even in our constitution, the articles are clear. Someone should be free to perform their profession without any intimidation. Now, you're seeing a situation where lawyers are being deliberately attacked, and those ones who are not brave enough, they will never come out. I remember the cases you've been mentioning sometimes would come out as the bar to defend these people for, you know, obvious reasons. some of them, their own lawyers, are fearing to come at the forefront. But every day someone is asking you, are you sure you're safe? So why should I be scared because I'm going to represent someone? Because I'm waking up in the morning to do my job. But I think, to be clear, the message is, if a lawyer like Lukwago, someone who is known across board, everyone knows him as a lawyer, is being treated that way. So at the end of the day, the Ugandans will know that no one is safe. Not even a lawyer can save you because they are equally tied down.
I know this has sent a chilling effect within the Uganda Law Society and your members, but to what extent is this effect?
Oh, wow, it's to a huge extent, because most of them are fearing for their lives. Some lawyers now can no longer take on certain instructions. If a case is, they call it politically sensitive, the person you're going to represent realizes someone, the state is interested in, the political, so-called political cases. I don't know where we got that from. There are very few lawyers who will allow to take on those instructions, because someone will tell you, oh, I have my young children, I still have a young family, I don't want to be in trouble, I'm going to be the target. And indeed, they're being targeted. And that is really, it does not only affect the legal profession or the lawyers, but the country at large. Because at the end of the day, if a lawyer cannot wake up in the morning and they are able to go to court and do their work, even these Ugandans who feel they need to be defended, they will not do that. What will happen at the end of the day? People will begin taking the law into their hands. But for us, as the bar, we look at it as a crisis, and we've been calling upon the authorities to ensure that they stop, they desist from that. Again, another unfortunate bit of it is that procedurally, lawyers are officers of court. We're actually referred to as officers of court. And in all these happenings, we've not seen a situation a single day where the judiciary has come out to say that, hey, listen, we're also putting our foot down. These are our officers. We need to have them protected. The judiciary has remained so silent. The silence is so loud, which makes us believe as lawyers we are on our own. Yet these people are equally lawyers. We actually reached out to the head of the judiciary, wrote to the Chief Justice, and wanted them to make at least a statement or make their position clear. But because nothing has come out, now we know on which side they fall. So that leaves us as the lawyers in the country on our own. And the only information we've seen, the only people have seen supporting us, and like you mentioned, we've had international entities, the East Africa Law Society, the Commonwealth Lawyers Society, the Pan-African Lawyers Union, the International Bar Association, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. They are the only ones who have stood in solidarity with lawyers in Uganda, but not the judiciary. So I don't know if the judiciary will think that, members of the judiciary think they are very safe, because the next thing we will see is a judge being picked from their chambers and being taken away. And they only turn to lawyers to defend them.
So if a lawyer becomes afraid of representing a controversial client, what is going to happen to the right to a fair hearing, a fair trial?
Well, a right to a fair trial is something that I think as a country we've totally disrespected, because take for example what is happening in the Kizza Besigye case. Part of the right to a fair trial is someone having a lawyer of their choice. Now we are seeing lead counsel in the case, who is Elias Lukwago, has been abducted, has been produced in court, has been charged with misprision of treason, and is inside. The other lawyer, there are two, Martha Karua, who is from Kenya, where in the East African community, is denied entry in the country, and she's being declared persona non grata. Meanwhile, even before she gets her practicing certificate, it is a hassle. The law council does not want to issue this certificate until the Uganda Law Society steps in. Now, Martha cannot enter the country, Lukwago is in prison, meaning Besigye, Dr. Kizza Besigye is stuck, and Obed Rutare are stuck. And we are seeing the situation where the man is saying, I need my legal representation, I need to have a fair hearing. I'm not denying, I want to be tried, I want my trial to go on. But for me to have my trial go on, I'm entitled to my lawyers. That is part of the fair hearing. Now, again, we should stop. I know it's not good to keep pointing fingers, but again, who is supposed to ensure that a right to a fair hearing is respected? It is the arbiter, the judiciary, who should be an independent arbiter. If people came before you, there's a case, you should follow, you should know that this person has come before you. Their basic rights, their basic tenements of a fair hearing are respected, so that at least you have a proper trial, a fair trial. But in a situation where even the arbiter has failed to enforce that, and we've seen it severally, not just in that case, we've seen it severally. If someone is not able to get their the lawyers of their choice, if someone is not given adequate time to prepare for their defense, if someone is being, recently we saw the Okello Nyum, I usually avoid using that example because of the sentiments. You saw how it happened, in the public, it's like a public lynching. And then it is the judiciary enforcing that. There's nothing like a fair hearing there. And the fact that this institution is allowed to be used in that manner to even breach the very basic principles that should be guiding their role. It is worrying. It's worrying us as a country and as Ugandans.
Remaining with the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye, Uganda's constitution protects an accused person's right to a fair hearing and, of course, within the law, representation by a lawyer of their choice. Which choice is being taken away from Dr. Kizza right now? Why is access to legal representation such a fundamental element of rule of law?
Well, it is very fundamental because every time you appear before a court of law, or you have a challenge, some of these, the procedures, the processes, an ordinary person will not understand them. It is someone who has appreciated these procedures. That is why the lawyers are there. The lawyers are there to represent clients in these matters because lawyers are able to interpret the law. They are able to understand the processes and guide the process. Now, you do not expect an ordinary Ugandan who has not gone through any, law class. There are those ones who represent themselves. Yes, it is a right for someone to represent themselves. But if, for example, it is a capital offense or semi-capital offense, it is to the extent that even if you cannot afford a lawyer, precisely if you don't have money to afford a lawyer, the government must provide a lawyer. That's how important it is considered, because some of these are serious cases. You might get a challenge simply because of interpretation of the law. So that is why it is the basis for, it's very important for, a fair hearing aspect to legal representation. But the Constitution is also very clear that the person must have a lawyer of their choice. So
if this is breached and we seem to be seeing a precedence being set, then what are the repercussions of the set precedence?
The repercussions are simple. Definitely it will invalidate the trial, because if you continue to push for such a trial where you've not respected the basics, then that trial is going to be, the decision, whatever decision, will easily be overturned by the appellate court, because these are some of the basics that you must respect, that you must follow. There is no brainer. There's even no rocket science to that. So we are wondering why it is hard to respect even the simplest of the things of saying, I want a lawyer of my choice. Why don't you allow me to have a lawyer of my choice in court? And then you're also saying, as a judicial officer, no, it is okay, we shall continue whether or not you have a lawyer of your choice. That is absurd.
At the end of the day, as we're coming to the close of this conversation, let's look in-house with the Uganda Law Society. Your own president is operating from outside of the country. And of course, there's also been challenges of how you are upholding the rule of law internally. How do you put to bed some of those sentiments by the people and the public?
We've been talking about the deliberate attack on the legal profession. When we came into office, we figured the most important thing is respecting and promoting and protecting the independence of the legal profession, so as to enable us to, execute our mandate properly without any interference from outside, without any hindrances. Now, at the forefront of that was the President, Isaac Semakade, who came out openly to say, this time, we must protect the independence of the legal profession. But of course, the powers that be are not interested in that. They want to have a law society where they interfere the decisions we make, the statements we make, whatever we say, probably to silence the legal profession, because they know the implication and the importance of a strong bar. So those are the implications, the backlash. That's why you see at the onset, it's a judicial officer again who sentences the president of the Uganda Law Society to a term of 2 years, sending him into exile. And then we are seeing the same judiciary issuing injunctions, stopping us from running our affairs normally. We are seeing the same judiciary where we've challenged some of these, decisions in court of appeal. The appeals are cause-listed and they are decause-listed. And this is exactly what we are talking about, the institutions being used to stifle dissent, simply because we are being looked at as the only challengers probably in this situation, in this current situation of fighting for the rule of law. You need to weaken the Law Society. But we've said no. And maybe to be clear to you is, regardless of what is happening, we've closed our eyes. We've tried to provide leadership and continue, fighting for what we know is the right thing. It doesn't matter that the president is in exile. We are still running normally, operating normally, doing that mandate which we are supposed to be doing, because it is our role to ensure that we advise government on matters touching the law, all those access to the law, assist the public in matters touching the law, and also fight for the members, for the welfare of the members, and the conditions of practice. And this is what we've done from day one up to now. That's why I keep pushing for, better conditions of work for lawyers like Lukwago and others. That's why we keep questioning some of the things they are doing, the deliberate attack on the legal profession, and we shall not relent until we get where we want to be.
Well, Ugandans are relenting because they're asking themselves a very big question this morning, and from what has been shared on this table, they're asking themselves, can they or should they still trust the law to protect them?
Well, Priscilla, that's an interesting scenario. We've also entered a situation of what I would call lawfare, where people are using the law for the wrong reasons. That is why, Priscilla, you see, even when someone has been abducted, tortured, kept, at the end of the day, they're also going to be brought to court, and they are saying you're being charged by the courts of law. They are using the law, you broke the law. That is the interesting thing. So even the people who are breaking the law actually know that they need the law. So we are saying that, and what to encourage Ugandans is they shouldn't give up. I know there's little hope because people look at the law, as sort of working for the oppressor, but that is called lawfare. At the end of the day, that cannot last for so long, because even them, they'll need that law. They need the law. That is why it is in our best interest to protect the law. Jealously, by the way, because it is the only shield. It is the only shield you have against the oppressor. It is the only shield you have to protect you as a citizen. And the reason we have the law, Priscilla, is because, I told you we have a social contract between the government and citizens. It is the only way you can hold the people in authority accountable to avoid overreach, to avoid, abuse of people. Because power is very interesting. Whoever has power can easily use the power whichever way they want. But there must be, a well-laid-down procedure on how to exercise this power. And if it is not respected, then who suffers? Okay. It is the citizens that suffer.
All right. Councillor Asiimwe, your closing remarks?
Well, once again, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and also to welcome you back, because we are used to having these conversations.
Yes,
but in the last few months, we are not able to do that, which is also part of the systematic problems we are having. But I want to encourage Ugandans out there that we should not relent. They should not go back and sit and imagine that, the law has completely been ignored. There are some people there who have goodwill, who are still fighting for due process, who are still fighting for the rule of law. And again, also to call upon the authorities to respect the rule of law, because there is no society that has ever developed, be it economically, politically, socially, when they are not respecting the rule of law. The rule of law is the bedrock of every development in any democratic society. So the people in authority should step up, should respect the rule of law, and the leaders of institutions should step up and also do their work, the mandate that has been given to them for purposes of seeing, living in a Uganda where people will enjoy, everyone will enjoy, including them, their children and their grandchildren.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Councillor Asiimwe, for your input to our Tech Note this morning, which was looking at the current rule of law in Uganda and, analyzing it when power meets the law. What happens? But in the case of Uganda, what is unfolding? The Constitution can promise equality. It can promise equality, and that's before the law. It does promise liberty. It also makes promises to protect a fair hearing. But for the question that we posed last, can Ugandans still trust the law to protect them? Well, the real test is what happens when those protections are actually being tested by the powers that be, because the rule of law is not simply about having the good laws on paper, as Councillor Asiimwe alluded to, but it is on the element of ensuring that those laws can restrain power in practice. And perhaps even the question Ugandans must continue to confront as of this morning: who watches the watchers and who holds the power accountable when the law itself is at stake? Anthony Asiimwe, Vice President of the Uganda Law Society, we thank you so much for joining us and your inputs and the work that the Law Society is doing to ensure that there is protection of rule of law.